Alright, the last two examples here are interpreting, making sure we understand what the slope, or we could call it the rate of change, and what the b value, the y-intercept, represent. So if we take a look at example 9, it says Jeff is starting a company selling watches. He finds that he can use the equation P equals negative 200 plus 30W to calculate the profit. Give possible real-world meanings for the numbers negative 200, 30, and W. So it says give possible. So that means there are more than one correct answer. So typically y equals mx plus b. Instead of y, we have p. And then we have 30w. And then the constant here is negative 200. Okay, so we have the slope, the number in front of the variable, since it's not x, it's w, so the slope is 30. And the vertical intercept, that's where does it cross the y-axis, but in this case, our b value is negative 200. Or we can write it, it says the vertical intercept. Anytime we have the word intercept, it means plug in 0 or put a 0. So it means it crosses at 0, comma, negative 200. And then the W, it says that he's selling watches. So the W would represent the number of watches being sold. Okay, so now we have to think about what the 30 and the negative 200 represent. So if we think of the 30 here, if the 30 is next to the W, okay, remember this is multiplication. That means something that's going to happen over and over and over again, like 30 plus 30 plus 30 plus 30. Well, if W represents the number of watches, then the 30 must represent $30 for every watch. Now, it also tells us in this problem that we're selling watches. So if we think of this as this is the profit he makes from making watches, and then the W is the number of watches. If we take the 30, and I could put a 1 underneath, since it's the rate of change, this represents the Y, or the output, the change in the output, which is money, the profit. And then the input right here is the number of watches. So we could say the profit is increasing $30 per watch that is sold. So you don't have to have it worded exactly, but you need to tell me it's increasing because it's positive, and then you have to tell me what the 30 represents and the 1. So a rate of change or slope, it's two variables. So you need to have $30 per watch or $30 per one watch. Okay, so now we need to explain what the negative 200 represents. So if I were graphing this here, it's saying that it crosses this axis here. It's not y in this case. Instead of y, it's p. So the profit, it's saying that the profit, so the amount of money they make, it says it's all the way down here at negative 200. So we need to explain why is it negative and what does the 200 represent? Well, the P is the profit. It's saying that the profit is negative 200. That means they haven't made any profit. So I need to explain initially why the profit's negative 200. So it says give possible real world meaning. So I could say that's the amount of money that Jeff spent to start up the business. That's why he's in the hole negative 200. So that's what I would personally write. So again, it's the profit and the profit's negative 200, so we need to say what it represents. So I'm going to put it's the startup cost for the watches. Instead of saying it's the startup cost for the watches, I could say initially $200 was spent to start the company. Okay, if we look at the next example, it says the relationship between the pounds of candy X. So I'm going to notate X represents the pounds of the candy. And it says purchased, and it says that Y is the price. So Y is the price. So that's just for me. I'm not writing it all out detailed or precise. That's just for me, so that way I can see it, what the X and the Y represent easily. So it says I need to tell what the slope and the vertical intercept represent. So we know that the number in front of X, or in front of the variable, is the slope or the rate of change, which is 3/4. So what that represents. So I know that the 3 over the 4 is rate of change, so the change in the Y and the change in the X. So the Y is the price, the amount for the candy. And then the 4 represents the X, which is pounds. So pounds. So to explain what this represents, I would say the price, and then it's positive, so we need to say increases. $3 every 4 pounds. So the amount of money you're spending, your total amount spending, goes up 3 every 4 pounds of candy you decide to buy. Okay, instead of saying that, so that's an excellent answer, or instead, we could, instead of 3/4, take 3 divided by 4, and we get 0.75, so 75 cents. So now instead we could say the total price of the candy increases, instead of $3, we could say 75 cents, and instead of every 4 pounds, underneath we could put a 1 there. So instead of every 4 pounds, we could put per pound. So either answer is correct. So if you tell me that the slope is 3/4, you need to have the other answer. If you divide it, then you found a unit rate, then you need to have this explanation here. Okay, so then the vertical intercept is this 2 here. So remember, when it has the word intercept, it means plug in 0 or have a 0. So the Y is 2 when X is 0. So since X is the pounds of candy, we're saying if no candy is purchased, the cost is still $2. So we need to think about why that is. Why, if we buy 0 pounds of candy, why is the cost 2 still? So I could put initially, so that means at the beginning, without purchasing any candy, so no candy, the cost is still $2. Okay, so that could be, maybe it's a candy store where maybe they sample candy when you walk in, so they charge you to get into the candy store, kind of like Costco charges you a membership fee, regardless if you go ever and buy anything. So maybe the 2 could represent a charge to get in, or maybe some sort of delivery charge that you're going to pay no matter how much candy you get. So again, there's all kinds of possible answers, but you need to explain why, when you don't buy any candy, is there still this $2 charge.